Princess stood in the center of the Grand Council chamber, trying not to shake. The floor beneath her feet was made of crystal that reflected the cold light from above. Around her, dozens of her people sat in high seats, looking down at her. Their skin shimmered with health and power. Hers looked dull and pale in comparison. The head physician finished reading his report. His voice echoed in the silent chamber. The princess lacks the genetic sequences necessary for reproduction. There is no cure. There is no hope. She is infertile. Had known this for months, but hearing it announced to everyone still felt like a punch to her chest. In society, your worth was measured by your ability to continue the bloodline. Without that, she was nothing. Just a drain on resources, a disappointment to the royal family. Her brother rose from his seat. He was the crown prince, tall and perfect, everything their parents had hoped for. He looked at with barely hidden contempt. A member of the royal family who cannot produce heirs has no purpose here, he said. However, we are not without mercy. Knew what was coming. She had heard the rumors in the palace corridors. Earth has recently joined the galactic community, continued. They have requested diplomatic representatives from various worlds. I propose we send our dear sister to fulfill this role. He smiled, and there was nothing kind in it. She can serve the empire in this small way, since she cannot serve it in the way that matters. Laughter rippled through the chamber, not loud because we're always controlled, but heard it clearly. They were all laughing at her. Earth was known as the most backward planet in the community. Humans were primitives who had barely discovered faster-than-light travel. They lived such short lives that they barely had time to learn anything. Sending there was not an honor. It was exile dressed up as duty. Her mother, the Empress Dowager, sat silent on her throne. She did not speak in defense. She did not even look at her daughter. The shame was too great. "Do you accept this assignment?" asked, though they both knew she had no choice. Lifted her chin, she would not cry in front of them. "I accept." The council voted quickly. It was unanimous. Within a week was packed and ready to leave. Her belongings fit into 3 small cases. Everything else, all the trappings of her royal life, stayed behind. She would not need them on Earth. The night before her departure, walked through the palace gardens one last time. The trees here grew in perfect spirals, their leaves singing softly in the wind. She had played here as a child, before the genetic tests, before everyone knew what she was. Or rather, what she was not. No one came to say goodbye. The next morning, boarded a small diplomatic ship. The pilot was professional and distant. He did not speak to her during the journey except to confirm their arrival time. Sat alone in the passenger cabin, watching her shrink in the viewport. The crystalline towers of the capital city sparkled in the sun, beautiful and cold, just like everything else about civilization. She wondered if she would ever see it again. Probably not. Lived for centuries. Her family could afford to simply forget about her, wait for her to fade into obscurity on some distant world. By the time she died, they would have long since replaced her in their minds. The journey to Earth took 3 weeks. Spent most of it in her cabin, reading reports about her new home. The information was not encouraging. Earth was covered mostly in water. The humans had only one language system, broken into hundreds of dialects. They fought constant wars over resources and ideas. Their technology was clumsy and inefficient. They ate dead animals and plants. The thought made stomach turn. But what struck her most was how short they lived. 80 years, maybe 100 if they were lucky, was already 200 years old. She would outlive several generations of humans. How could she form any meaningful connections with beings who died so quickly? The ship entered Earth's atmosphere over a city called Seoul. Pressed her face to the viewport, curious despite herself. The city sprawled below her, a chaotic mess of buildings and roads and lights. Nothing like the ordered beauty of architecture. It looked busy and loud and overwhelming. They landed on a platform on the outskirts of the city. Stepped out of the ship and the air hit her like a wall. It was thick and humid, full of strange smells. She could hear sounds everywhere, mechanical and natural, blending into a constant noise. After the quiet sterility of environments, it was almost too much. A young human woman waited at the base of the landing ramp. She had dark hair pulled back from her face and wore a simple blue suit. When she saw, she smiled. It was a genuine smile, reaching her eyes. Had not seen anyone smile at her like that in a very long time. "Princess," the woman said, bowing slightly, "welcome to Earth. My name is, I'm the ambassador assigned to help you settle in." Translator device rendered the words in her language, but there was a warmth in the human's tone that did not quite translate. She found herself responding to it anyway. "Thank you," said stiffly. She was not used to kindness anymore. Helped her gather her bags and led her to a vehicle. It moved on wheels across the ground instead of hovering, gripped her seat as they lurched into traffic. Human drivers were aggressive and fast, honking horns and weaving between lanes. Chatted the entire way, pointing out landmarks and explaining local customs. She seemed genuinely excited to have there. It confused. Did this human not know that she was a reject, sent here as punishment? Did she not understand that this assignment was a joke? But kept smiling, kept talking, kept treating her like she mattered. And slowly, very slowly, something tight in his chest began to loosen. They pulled up to a building in a busy district. "This is where you'll be staying," said. "I know it's not a palace, but I think you'll find it comfortable." Looked up at the ordinary apartment building and felt something unexpected. Relief. No crystal halls. No cold perfection. Just a normal place where normal people lived normal lives. Maybe exile would not be so bad after all. The apartment was small, stood in the middle of the main room and could almost touch both walls if she stretched her arms out. There was a sleeping area, a washing area, and a small kitchen. The furniture was simple and functional, nothing like the grand chambers she had grown up in. She loved it immediately. For the first time in her life, had space that was truly hers. No servants hovering nearby. No family members watching her with disappointment. Just silence and privacy and the freedom to breathe. The first few weeks were difficult. Everything about Earth was overwhelming. The gravity was slightly heavier than she was used to, making her tired quickly. The air had smells she could not identify, some pleasant and some definitely not. The food ambassador brought her was strange and often too spicy for her sensitive digestive system. But the hardest part was the noise. Earth was never quiet. Even late at night, could hear traffic on the streets below, people talking and laughing, music playing somewhere in the distance. On her, silence was valued. Here, humans seemed to fill every moment with sound. Dr. Minu came to visit her on the fourth day. He was assigned by the Earth government to monitor her health and help her adjust. He was older then, with gray streaking his dark hair and kind eyes behind his glasses. "How are you managing?" he asked, setting up his medical scanner. "I cannot sleep," admitted. "It is too loud." Minu nodded like he understood. "Humans are noisy creatures," he said. "We live such short lives that we try to fill every moment. We don't have time for silence." He finished his scan and showed her the results. "Your biology is stable, but you're stressed. That's normal. Culture shock affects everyone." "How long do humans typically live?" asked. 80 years, maybe 90 if we're lucky and take care of ourselves," Minu said. "Some reach 100, but that's rare." Was 212 years old. She would likely live another 3 or 4 centuries. The thought of forming friendships with beings who would die in what felt like an instant made her heart hurt. Minu seemed to read her thoughts. "I know it seems strange to you," he said gently, "but there's something beautiful about living quickly. We burn bright because we have to. We don't waste time on things that don't matter." Thought about that for a long time after he left. The building where she lived had a maintenance office on the ground floor. One morning, her sink stopped working. Water leaked onto the floor no matter what she did. She called the office number that had given her, and within an hour, someone knocked on her door. The man who stood there was human, wearing work clothes with oil stains on them. He had strong hands and a kind face. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her. Most humans reacted that way too. Their iridescent skin and unusual features were startling at first. But then he smiled. "You must be Princess," he said. I'm here to fix your sink." His voice was warm and friendly. He did not bow or act nervous around her. He just walked in, tools in hand, and got to work. While he worked, he talked. He told her about the building, about the neighborhood, about the best places to get food nearby. He spoke simply, not using complicated words, as if he understood that her translator might struggle with complex sentences. "There," he said after 20 minutes, "all fixed. The seal was worn out. I replaced it." "Thank you," said. Paused at the door. "If you need anything else, just call, and welcome to the building. I hope you like it here." After he left, realized she was smiling. It was such a small thing, fixing a sink, but had treated her like a normal person. Not a princess, not a failure, just a neighbor who needed help. Over the following weeks, began to explore the city. At first, she only went out with, but gradually she grew brave enough to walk alone. Seoul was overwhelming but also fascinating. Markets sold food she had never seen before. Parks were full of people exercising and playing. Children ran and shouted without anyone telling them to be quiet and proper. She discovered coffee shops where people sat for hours, reading or working or just talking. She found libraries full of books in languages she could not read but tried to anyway. She learned to use the subway system, though the crowds during rush hour made her anxious. And she kept running into, he seemed to be everywhere, fixing the elevator, repairing the heating system, replacing light fixtures in the hallways. He always stopped to talk to her, asking how she was settling in, recommending places she should visit. One day, he found her sitting on a bench outside the building, looking confused at a paper menu from a nearby restaurant. "Need help?" he asked. "I cannot read your writing," admitted. Sat down next to her. "What do you like to eat?" "I do not know. Everything here is so different." He grinned. "Let me show you something." He took her to a street food vendor and ordered something called. It was rice cakes in spicy sauce. "Try it," he said. "Start with a small bite." Bit into one carefully. The spice made her eyes water, but underneath it was something sweet and savory, and completely unlike anything she had tasted before. "It is good," she said, surprised. "See, Earth food isn't so bad." Bought her more different things, explaining what each one was. They sat on a wall by the river and ate together, watching the sun set over the city. Felt something strange in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as happiness. As the months passed, became her guide to Earth. He taught her about the seasons, how the weather changed and plants grew and died and grew again. He took her to festivals where people wore bright colors and danced in the streets. He introduced her to music that made her want to move, even though considered dancing undignified. Dr. Minyu noticed the change in her. "You seem healthier," he said during one of his regular checkups. "Less stressed." "I am learning to enjoy it here," said. "That's good. You deserve to be happy." The word surprised her. Deserve. No one had ever suggested she deserved happiness. Her worth had always been tied to what she could do for others, for the family, for the empire. The idea that she might deserve good things just for existing was foreign. But she was beginning to believe it might be true. One evening, they sat by the Han River during a festival of lights. Lanterns floated on the water, glowing like stars. Watched them drift past, peaceful for the first time in years. "Are you happy here?" asked quietly. Thought about it. She thought about her cold and her disappointed family. She thought about this loud, chaotic, beautiful city and the humans who had welcomed her. She thought about the man sitting next to her who made her laugh and treated her like she mattered. "Yes," she said, "I am happy." Smiled, then very slowly he leaned closer. His heart started beating faster. She knew what was coming. She had seen humans do this. When he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet. Translator had no words for what she felt, but she did not need them. Some things were universal. Later, much later, there would be consequences. But in that moment, under the floating lights, allowed herself to just feel, to be present, to burn bright like Minyu had said. Because maybe the humans were right. Maybe the length of life mattered less than the depth of it. Woke up feeling sick for the third morning in a row. She barely made it to the bathroom before her stomach rebelled. When the nausea finally passed, she sat on the cold tile floor, confused and worried. Did not get sick often. Their immune systems were highly advanced. Food poisoning was almost impossible, so what was wrong with her? She called Dr. Minyu. He arrived within an hour, medical equipment in hand. "Tell me your symptoms," he said, setting up his scanner. "Nausea mostly in the morning, fatigue, dizziness, and my sense of smell has become very sensitive." Paused. "Everything smells too strong now." Minyu ran the scanner over her body slowly, his expression growing more confused with each reading. "This is strange," he muttered. "Your hormone levels are elevated. Your body temperature is higher than normal, and there seems to be some kind of growth in your—" He stopped. His eyes went wide. "That's impossible." "What is impossible?" He turned the scanner screen toward her, looked at the image, not understanding at first. Then she saw it. A tiny shape, no bigger than her thumb, nestled in her reproductive system. A shape with a heartbeat. "You're pregnant," Minyu whispered. The room tilted, gripped the edge of the examination table. "No, that cannot be. I am infertile. Every physician confirmed it. I lack the necessary genetic sequences." "I know what your records say, but look at this scan. That is definitely a developing fetus." Minyu ran his hands through his hair. "How is this possible? When did you last have intimate contact with someone?" His face flushed. Did not discuss such things openly, but this was a medical situation. 6 weeks ago, with— "From the building maintenance," Minyu stared at her. "Cross-species reproduction between and humans should be completely impossible. Our DNA structures are totally different. Even if you weren't infertile, this shouldn't be able to happen." But it had happened. The evidence was right there on the screen, a tiny heartbeat pulsing steadily. Felt a dozen emotions at once. Fear, because this was supposed to be impossible. Confusion, because she did not understand how it could be real. But underneath everything else was something unexpected. Hope. For her entire adult life, she had been defined by what she could not do. Could not produce an heir, could not serve the family, could not fulfill her purpose. And now her body was doing the one thing everyone had said it never would. "What do I do?" she asked quietly. Minyu looked at her seriously. "That's your choice. This is unprecedented. I have no idea if the pregnancy is even viable or if it will be safe for you. We're in completely unknown territory here." "I want to keep it," said. The words came out before she even thought about them, but she knew they were true. "Whatever this is, whatever happens, I want to try." Minyu nodded slowly. "Then we'll do everything we can to help, but I need to bring in more specialists. We'll need to monitor you constantly. And I have to report this to the medical council. A viable human hybrid is huge news. It could change everything we know about xenobiology." "Will they tell my family?" "Eventually, yes. Something like this can't be kept secret for long." Felt cold, her family. They would find out that the defective princess had somehow gotten pregnant with a human's child. She could imagine's reaction, the council's shock and disgust. But when she looked at the screen again, at that tiny flickering heartbeat, she felt her resolve strengthen. Let them be disgusted. This was her life now, her choice, her child. She told that evening. He had come to fix her heating unit and found her sitting on the couch, staring at the wall. When he asked what was wrong, everything spilled out. "You're pregnant," he said, sitting down heavily, "with my child." According to Dr. Minyu's scan, yes, though he says it should be impossible. was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "What do you want to do?" It was the same question Minyu had asked, but from it meant something different. He was not asking as a doctor or a scientist. He was asking as the father, as someone who cared about her. "I want to keep the baby," said, "if that is acceptable to you." Took her hand. His palm was warm and rough from work. "Of course it is. I'll do whatever you need. We're in this together." Felt tears in her eyes. On her, reproduction was a clinical matter arranged for genetic optimization. Emotions were not supposed to be involved. But here, with this human who held her hand and promised to stay, emotions were everything. The pregnancy was difficult from the start. Dr. Minyu assembled a team of specialists, both human and alien. They ran test after test, trying to understand what was happening. The fetus was developing, but not following normal patterns for either species. It seemed to be finding its own way, combining genetic traits in ways that should not work. Experienced every pregnancy symptom twice as badly because her body was not designed for this. The nausea lasted all day, not just mornings. Her back hurt constantly. She was exhausted but could not sleep. Food tasted wrong. Smells made her sick. But the worst part was the fear. Every day she worried that this would be the day it all went wrong, that her body would reject the hybrid life inside her, that the baby would stop developing, that the impossible gift would be taken away. Stayed with her through all of it. He held her hair when she was sick. He rubbed her aching back. He brought her food she could tolerate and sat with her during the long, anxious nights. His presence made everything bearable. At 3 months, Dr. Minyu made a breakthrough. "I think I understand what's happening," he said, showing them complex genetic charts. "DNA is very precise, very structured. You need exact genetic matches to reproduce, which is why your people have such problems with fertility. But human DNA is different. It's flexible, adaptable. We can mix with a wide variety of genetic types because our DNA knows how to adjust and compromise." "So's DNA adapted to work with mine?" asked. "More than that. I think his genetic material filled in the gaps that you were missing. Humans have this incredible ability to bridge differences. It's probably why we've survived as a species despite being so physically weak. We adapt." Thought about that. Her people prided themselves on their genetic purity, their superiority. But that superiority had led them to a dead end. Meanwhile, these short-lived humans with their messy, flexible genes had found a way to create life where could not. News of the pregnancy began to spread through the scientific community, started receiving messages from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to study her, to understand how this had happened. Some of the messages were kind and supportive. Others were clinical and cold, treating her like a laboratory specimen. And then the message she had been dreading arrived. It was from the Grand Council. They had heard about the pregnancy. They demanded that she return home immediately for verification and proper medical oversight. Read the message 3 times. The tone was commanding, as if she were still subject to their authority, as if she had not been exiled and forgotten. "You don't have to go," said, reading over her shoulder. "I know. But you're thinking about it." Put her hand on her stomach. At 5 months she was starting to show. The baby moved sometimes, little flutters that made her heart race. "If I do not go, they will never recognize the child. She will have no legal status in society." "Does that matter? She'll be recognized here on Earth." "It might matter to her someday," said quietly. "And there's something else. If what Dr. Minyu says is true, if human hybrids are possible, that could help my people. Our fertility crisis is destroying our civilization. This child might be the proof they need that there's a solution." Pulled her close. "Whatever you decide, I support you, but please be careful. Your family didn't treat you well before. I don't trust them to be kind now." Leaned against him, feeling the baby move inside her. She had been sent to Earth as a joke, a worthless princess exiled to a backward planet. But here she had found love, purpose. life itself growing inside her. Now she would return to face those who had cast her aside, and she would show them that their joke had become a miracle. Gave birth on a rainy Tuesday in Seoul. The labor lasted 18 hours and nearly killed her. Human biology was not meant to mix, and her body struggled with every stage of delivery. Dr. Minyu and his team worked frantically, trying to keep both mother and child alive. But in the end, heard the most beautiful sound in the universe, her daughter's first cry. The baby was small, weighing just under 3 kilograms. Her skin shimmered with iridescent tones, but underneath was a warmth of color that was purely human. She had dark eyes and delicate features. Her cry was loud enough to crack the window, a trait that made the nurses jump. "She's perfect," whispered, tears running down his face as he held his daughter for the first time. Exhausted and in pain, could only nod. Perfect. Impossible, theirs. They named her Sara, which meant sky in Korean, because she was born between two worlds, belonging fully to neither but carrying the best of both. The first month was hard. Sara needed special formula because could not produce milk compatible with human biology. The baby cried constantly, her vocal cords stronger than human infant lungs should be. She barely slept, keeping them both awake for days at a time. But slowly they learned. They figured out what made Sara comfortable, what she needed, how to soothe her, took leave from work to help, discovered reserves of strength she did not know she had. Together, they became parents. Dr. Minyu visited weekly to check on Sora's development. "She's thriving," he said, amazed. "Against all odds, she's growing normally. Her hybrid genetics seem to be stabilizing." "What does that mean for her future?" asked. "I honestly don't know. We're learning as we go." He smiled at the baby sleeping in his arms. "But she's strong. She'll figure it out." When Sara was 2 months old, the second message arrived from the council. This one was not a request. It was a command, was to return immediately and bring the child. If she refused, Sara would never be recognized as legitimate. She would have no legal standing in society, no claim to heritage or title. Ambassador fought hard against it. "They can't force you to go," she insisted. "You're under Earth's protection now." "But they can refuse to acknowledge," Sara said. "And if what Dr. Minyu discovered is true, this information could save their entire species. I have to try." The hardest part was telling he could not come. Law was clear. Only citizens could attend Grand Council sessions. Humans were not permitted. "I don't like this," he said, holding Sara close. "Sending you back to the people who hurt you without any support. Dr. Minyu will be with me, and I am not the same person they sent away." Touched her daughter's soft hair. "I am stronger now. I have something worth fighting for." The journey back to her took 3 weeks, spent most of it in her cabin with Sara trying to prepare herself mentally. She had not seen her family in over a year, so much had changed. She had changed. As the ship approached the crystalline towers of the capital, felt her old anxiety returning. But then Sara grabbed her finger with a tiny hand and remembered why she was here. The Grand Council chamber was exactly as she remembered. Cold, crystalline, imposing. Her family sat in their high seats looking down at her, but this time walked in with her head high, carrying her daughter in her arms. The chamber fell silent, every eye fixed on the baby, could see the shock on their faces. They had not really believed it until now. Prince was the first to speak. His voice dripped with contempt. "You dare bring this hybrid abomination before the council?" Felt anger flash through her, hot and human. "I bring my daughter, your niece, the child you claimed I could never have. A child born of contaminated genetics and primitive human DNA," sneered. "You were sent away because you were defective. This does not change that." "Actually, it changes everything." Dr. Minyu stepped forward, carrying his data tablets. "If the council will permit me to present my findings." There was murmuring among the council members. Finally, one of the senior scientists nodded. "Proceed." Minyu activated the holographic display. Complex genetic charts filled the air. The fertility crisis has been worsening for 3,000 years. Your population is declining. In another millennium, you may face extinction. We know this, snapped. What does it have to do with this hybrid? Everything. Your species has bred itself into a genetic dead end. You've selected for purity for so long that your gene pool has become too narrow. You can no longer produce viable offspring because there's not enough genetic diversity. Minyu pulled up another chart. But human DNA is different. We're adaptable, flexible. We can bridge genetic gaps that cannot cross. He showed them Sora's genetic sequence. This child should be impossible. Princess lacks key reproductive genes, but human DNA compensated for those gaps. It adapted and filled in what was missing. That's why Sora exists. The chamber erupted in noise. Council members argued with each other, some shouting, some demanding silence, held Sora closer, shielding her from the chaos. Finally, the Empress Dowager raised her hand. The room fell quiet. She had not spoken yet, had not even looked at since she arrived. Now she stood, her robes shimmering in the light. "Let me see the child," she said. His heart pounded. This was her mother, who had sat silent while was exiled, who had let her only daughter be sent away in shame. Slowly climbed the steps to the throne. She stood before her mother, holding Sora out. The baby was awake, staring around with curious dark eyes. Looked at her granddaughter for a long time. Then very gently she touched Sora's cheek. "She has your nose," she said quietly, "and your father's eyes." "She is healthy," said, "and strong, and possible even though everyone said she was not." Like her mother, looked at then, really looked at her. There was something in her eyes that had never seen before, regret perhaps, or sorrow. "I should have spoken for you. When the council condemned you, I should have defended my daughter. You did not believe I had value." "No," his voice was soft. "I was afraid of what it meant for our family if you were defective, afraid of what others would think. So I let them send you away, and I told myself it was for the best." She touched Sora's hand, and the baby grabbed her finger. "But you have done what our finest scientists could not. You have found a way forward." She turned to face the council. "My daughter was cast aside for her supposed defect, yet she has accomplished the impossible. She has created life where we could not. Perhaps the defect was never hers. Perhaps it was ours, for being too proud to see solutions outside our own limited view." Stood angrily. "You cannot seriously be suggesting we contaminate our bloodlines with human genetics." "I am suggesting we face reality," said firmly. "Our species is dying. This child proves there is a way to save us. Are we so proud that we would choose extinction over adaptation?" The debate raged for hours. Stood before them, Sora sleeping peacefully in her arms, while the council argued about genetics and purity and the future of their species. Some council members supported. Others sided with, claiming that mixing with humans would destroy what made superior. The arguments grew heated, voices rising in the usually quiet chamber. Finally, they called for a vote. 2 questions. First, would they recognize Sora as a legitimate heir? Second, would they authorize a joint human genetic research program? The first vote was narrow but passed. Sora was officially recognized as Princess Sora, legitimate daughter of Princess, with all rights and titles that came with royal blood. The second vote passed by a larger margin. The Empire would establish a partnership with Earth to study human compatibility and address the fertility crisis. As the session ended, approached again. "You could stay," she said. "Return to your place in the family. We have much to make up for." Looked around the cold, perfect chamber. Then she thought of her small, warm apartment in Seoul, of waiting for her return, of the messy, noisy, beautiful life she had built on Earth. "Thank you," she said, "but my home is there now with my family." Nodded slowly. "Then let me offer you a different position, ambassador of hybrid relations, a bridge between our two species. You would live on Earth but represent interests in this new partnership. Considered it a way to help both her peoples, a purpose that was truly hers. I accept. Mother and daughter looked at each other for a long moment. There was too much pain between them to simply forget, but perhaps there was also a path toward something better. Take care of her, said, looking at Sora, and yourself. I will, promised. As her ship lifted away from the crystalline towers, watched them shrink in the viewport again. But this time, she felt no sorrow. She was going home. The ship touched down in Seoul on a warm spring evening, stood at the top of the ramp, holding Sora, and looked out at the city lights spreading below like stars. She had been gone for 6 weeks. It felt like a lifetime. Was waiting at the landing platform. When he saw them, his whole face lit up. He ran up the ramp and pulled them both into his arms, careful not to crush the baby between them. You're back, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Both of you safe. We are home, said, and meant it with every part of her being. That night in their small apartment made them dinner while fed Sora. Everything felt right. The sounds of the city outside, the smell of cooking food, the weight of her daughter in her arms. This was where she belonged. Tell me everything, said as they ate. Told him about the council session, about anger and her mother's surprising support, about the votes and the new position she had been offered. Ambassador of Hybrid Relations, she said. I would help coordinate research between Earth and the Empire, help both our species. That sounds important. It is, but it also means I can stay here. I do not have to choose between my old world and my new one. Reached across the table and took her hand. I'm proud of you. You went back to the people who hurt you and changed their entire civilization's future. Had not thought of it that way, but he was right. The scared, ashamed princess who had left Earth 6 weeks ago had returned, having altered the course of history for 2 species. The next morning, Dr. Minyu came to visit. He brought news. The scientific community is buzzing, he said. Researchers from a dozen different species want to study human compatibility. Earth's government has approved a new xenobiology research center, and they want you to be part of it. Me, I am not a scientist. No, but you're the proof that it works, and you understand both cultures. We need that perspective. He smiled at Sora, who was chewing on her own foot. Besides, we'll need to monitor Sora's development carefully. She's the first of her kind. Over the following months, settled into her new role. The research center was built near the university. Scientists came from across the galaxy to study the data from Sora's birth. They wanted to understand exactly how human DNA had bridged the genetic gaps. What they discovered changed everything. Dr. Minyu presented the findings at a major galactic science conference. Attended, holding Sora in her arms. The baby was 7 months old now, babbling and grabbing at everything within reach. Human DNA has a unique quality, Minyu explained to the assembled scientists. We call it genetic plasticity. Humans evolved on a planet with extreme environmental variation. We had to adapt or die. Over millions of years, our genetics developed an unusual flexibility. We can tolerate more genetic variation than most species. We can incorporate foreign DNA more easily. We can bridge gaps. He pulled up a chart showing genetic compatibility across different species. Humans are uniquely positioned to help species facing fertility crises. Not just. At least 6 other species we've studied show similar genetic bottlenecks. Human DNA could be the key to their survival. The implications were staggering. Humanity, the most primitive member of the galactic community, had something no other species possessed. They were not the strongest or the longest lived, but they were the most adaptable, the most able to connect with others. Watched the presentation with Sora on her lap. Her daughter was the proof of human potential, the living embodiment of what could happen when species set aside pride and worked together. After the conference, received a message from her mother. The Empire had begun a careful integration program with Earth. Young would be allowed to visit Earth, to study and work alongside humans. Cultural exchange programs were being established, and quietly, very quietly, some were forming relationships with humans, hopping for children of their own. You started a revolution, the message said, whether you intended to or not. Had not intended any of it. She had just fallen in love. Everything else had followed from that one simple human act. When Sora turned 1 year old, they had a party in the apartment. It was crowded with people. Family, who had welcomed warmly despite her being alien. Ambassador and her team. Dr. Minu and several of his research colleagues. Even a few scientists who were now working on Earth. Sora sat in the middle of the chaos, covered in cake, laughing her glass-shattering laugh. She had started walking the week before, toddling around on unsteady legs, getting into everything. She spoke in a mix of Korean and creating her own hybrid language that only her parents fully understood. She was growing fast, her development somewhere between human and rates. No one knew what her would be or how she would age. They were making it up as they went along, learning from her as much as teaching her. Watched her daughter play with the other children at the party and felt something she had not felt in years: peace. Not just happiness, but deep, settled peace. Ambassador found her standing by the window. "Penny for your thoughts," she asked. "I was thinking about how strange life is," said. "1.5 years ago, I was sent here as punishment. My family wanted to hide me away and forget I existed. And now you're changing the galaxy." "I did not mean to change anything. I just wanted to live, to find some small happiness in exile." Smiled. "That's very human of you. We're good at making the best of bad situations, at finding joy in unexpected places." She nodded toward Sora. "At creating miracles without meaning to." That night, after everyone had gone home and Sora was asleep in her crib and sat on their small balcony, the city hummed below them, never quiet, never still. Had learned to love that constant sound. It meant life was happening all around her, people living and loving and struggling and celebrating. "Do you ever regret it?" asked quietly, "giving up your old life?" Thought about the crystal towers and cold halls of her, about the family that had abandoned her, about the life of empty perfection she had been supposed to lead. Then she thought about this small apartment and the sound of the city, about the man beside her who had taught her what love could be, about their daughter sleeping inside, impossible and perfect and real. "Never," she said, "not for a single moment. Even though they sent you here as a joke." Laughed, especially because of that. "They meant to humiliate me. Instead, they gave me everything." She leaned against him, watching the city lights. Somewhere out there, other humans were living their brief, bright lives, falling in love, making mistakes, finding joy in the chaos. Burning bright because they had to, because they did not have time for anything else. And somewhere far away, on a crystalline planet among the stars, were beginning to learn what humans had known all along. That weakness could be strength, that difference could be beautiful, that the shortest lives could teach the longest ones how to truly live. Sora had changed everything. One small baby, half human and half, had become the bridge between two civilizations. The proof that what seemed impossible just required the courage to try something different. But she had not done it alone. She existed because had been brave enough to accept love, because had been kind to a lonely alien in a strange land, because Dr. Minu had dedicated himself to understanding rather than judging, because Ambassador had welcomed a refugee with warmth instead of pity. She existed because humans, for all their flaws and their short lives and their primitive technology, knew something that more advanced species had forgotten. That connection mattered more than perfection. That love could bridge any gap. That the greatest strength was the ability to adapt, to change, to grow. They had sent the infertile alien princess away as a joke, but the joke was on them, because she had come back with a baby, yes, But she had also come back with something far more valuable, proof that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy was not their technology or their strength. It was their heart. Looked up at the stars, at the vast universe spread above the city. Somewhere out there were 1,000 different species, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, each struggling to survive in their own way. And now, because of one impossible child and the humans who had shown an exiled princess what family could mean, they all had a new option, a new hope. The revolution had begun, not with weapons or politics or grand declarations, but with something much simpler and much more powerful. With love, with acceptance, with the very human belief that everyone deserved happiness, even a broken alien princess who had been thrown away. Especially her. Inside, Sora made a small sound in her sleep, went to check on her, standing over the crib and watching her daughter breathe. Half human, all miracle. "Thank you," whispered to the sleeping child, "for teaching me that impossible just means no one has tried yet." Sora yawned, showing tiny teeth, and settled deeper into sleep. And in that small apartment in Seoul, on a planet that had been dismissed as primitive and backward, the future quietly continued to unfold.